Hey guys, welcome to the tutorial today where I'm going to be teaching you how to do some basic editing to portrait photos, like this. So we're going to go open up our photo in Photoshop. And if it is a raw file like a .cr2 or whatever Sony's is or Panasonic or Nikon's is, like the actual raw file. Once you open up in Photoshop, it will open in camera raw. If you're using a JPEG or something that isn't an actual like raw file, I will show you how to still get in the camera raw and do some basic tweaking. You can't do as much if you're just using a JPEG. I'll show you how to do some basic adjustments. So we have our photo loaded up into Photoshop. Going into lens corrections, remove chromatic aberration, and enable your profile corrections. Sometimes for some of my lenses, this doesn't always like pop up right away. So then you just go into your profile, go into the make or the brand of it. I've got a Canon. Go through, select your lens, whatever, and it should pop up. Next, you're going to want to go into your detail section. I usually add a little bit of sharpness to portraits, but not too much. You don't want to add a ton of sharpness. So what you're going to do is hold Alt and then drag this mask slider. This masking slider basically, when you do that, it basically shows you what is being sharpened and what isn't. So, and a lot of times when you're editing photos, you don't want like his skin to be sharpened or anything like that. You just want, say, his glasses, his eyes, maybe those sorts of things. That's what you want sharpened, but not the actual, really necessarily the skin. If you're shooting portraits at night or later in the day where you have a little bit of gray in your image, add some noise reduction. It always helps. Then you're going to want to go in, adjust your temperature a little bit. This is all up to your preferences. I'm going to make it a little bit warmer since it's a fall photo. Probably right about there. So I'm going to make it a little bit more purple, but I will go into my colors later and correct that to take a lot of the purple out, just so it's not purple or green. I'm going to take both of the purple and green saturation down a little bit later. Screw around with your exposure. I'm going to make mine just a little bit. That's probably there. Play around with your exposure, get the exposure how you want it, and then go into your tone curve and start messing around with that. For me, we'll bring up the highlights just a touch. Bring up the lights maybe a little bit. In a lot of cases, you will want to bring down your shadows a little bit. I'm not going to do too much, but just a little bit like that. I'm going to bring down my darks just a hair. That's probably good. Start messing around with your clarity and your texture. Yeah, just a touch. Add a little bit of contrast in. I'm actually going to probably take my clarity down. I'll probably just do a little bit of negative clarity. You don't want a ton of clarity or texture in your portraits, because if you add too much, in most cases, not always, but it will in most cases look kind of bad, especially for just a simple portrait like these. I'm going to go mess around with my saturation a little bit. A lot of times I like to take out just a touch of saturation, maybe add in a touch of vibrance. I'd say that's looking alright. I'll maybe add in a little bit more lights. Bring up a little light. Turn the highlights down just a hair. A lot of this is just playing around with it and figuring everything out. Then go into your HSL tab. And then I'm going to desaturate the reds just a touch. Not a ton. It's probably alright. Oh, and also, the skin's a little bit pale. You want it to be a little bit warmer, or it's a little bit maybe too red. You want it to be a little bit cooler, whatever. There's a couple ways to do it using adjustment tools in Photoshop. The first is to use a radio filter. This is the easy, quick way to do it. It's not quite perfect. That's what I'm going to be doing today, but usually it works alright. Or you can use an adjustment brush and paint over all the skin. Don't paint over any of like the lines or his glasses or anything, or eyes, any of that. But I'm going to be using a radio filter, just adding something like that. You're going to want to make sure this is clicked on the inside. This is all from when I did some editing before, so I'm going to change all of this. Going to reset that all down to 0. So that's one thing, is Photoshop saves like all your adjustments for whenever you use these filters. I don't know why, but I guess sometimes it is useful, so there's that. So I'm going to, I might just bring up the exposure just a touch. And then you can go into this little color thing right here. I'm going to move that over, and I'm going to make his skin just a touch warmer. Just mess around with the hue and the saturation a little bit. And this is, you can use the same thing with the adjustment brush. It's the same setup. That's about where I need to be. I'm going to add in, I'm going to make this a little bit more purple. Although I'm going to be taking out a lot of the purples. It was a little bit green tinted, and I don't want it to be like that, so I made the tint a little bit more purple. I'm going to, right now, go into purple and magenta saturation and just take that down like crazy. And you can also take away a lot. I'm going to take away a lot of the red. I'm going to go in, adjust all my HSL, all my colors and all that. Your luminance basically adjusts how bright or dark the colors are. It's hard to explain, but it's basically how dark or bright from the color being at completely black to being like completely blown out white. That's pretty much what it is. Your hue is just what hue of the color it is. And then your saturation, obviously how saturated each color is. You generally don't want to change up the color of the clothing they're wearing too much. So I'm just going to make a couple minor color adjustments to it. A lot of photographers don't do this, but it's something that I personally like to do. Where if there's a color that's not in your image at all and it's not affecting the image, a lot of times I like to just like turn the saturation slider down 50% or something, just so if there's maybe a tiny bit of color noise, like a tiny bit of graininess that has like some color in it, you can just turn it down and it won't be quite as noticeable. So I'm just going to keep playing with this a little bit more. I might make this a little bit more green and then take out the greens. Just play around with these. That's really what it is. One thing I like to do, and I think a lot of other portrait photographers like to do, and just photography in general, make a radial filter that's kind of good size around your subject. Have this click to the outside, have it affect the outside. You're going to bring the exposure down, not a ton, but maybe one stop or so. You can play around and figure out exactly what you want to do, but I'm just going to leave it as is right there. This is the image that I've got so far in Camera Raw. I'm going to hit Open Image, open it into Photoshop. First of all, if you're editing a JPEG and you open the image, it will directly open it just into a Photoshop document like this. What you want to do to get into Camera Raw filter is you want to go hit Filter and then Camera Raw filter. And it will bring it up into Camera Raw. After you get all the basic adjustments done in Camera Raw, you bring it into Photoshop. Next, you're going to want to hit Control or Command Shift Alt N, and it will add a new layer. And then you want to basically paste this background layer onto a new layer. You'll do that by hitting Control or Command Shift Alt E, and it will paste onto a new layer. Now what we're going to do is we're going to remove all of like the acne and all of just the little dirt and grime and all that sort of stuff from his face. One main tool for that is going to be the spot healing brush tool. So you want to hit J on your keyboard to access it. I use the Wacom, but generally you'll just use either your mouse or your laptop's trackpad. Just go through, remove all that. We got some, I don't know, some lint or something up in his glasses. I'm going to try and remove that the best that I can. This will take a few minutes, so just be patient. Again, I'm not the best portrait editor, and definitely not the best portrait retoucher, but this is kind of just the basic steps that you'll need to do for retouching and editing portraits. I'm going to speed this up quick, and I'll catch back with you when I'm done. Now I've got a decent little retouch on the skin. It isn't 100% perfect, but I'd say it's pretty good. Next I'm going to remove just a little bit of this stuff, and for the really small little pieces of like the cornstalk or whatever this is, you can just go in and use the spot healing tool. For these like bigger pieces like this, you want to hit L, select an area around this, make a selection around what you want to remove, and then hit Shift Backspace, and this will bring up your content aware fill tool. You hit enter, and there you go. Going to do the same with these things. And the same with some of the stuff around his hat. These little pieces are small, so you just take the spot healing brush and do it that way. I'd say that's pretty good. There's a little piece right here. And I'm going to be, for this, I'm going to be using the clone stamp tool. So you'll hit S on your keyboard to bring up the clone stamp tool, hold Alt, and then while you're holding Alt, select where you want to like basically have your starting point be, because you're basically cloning something from another part of the image onto the part that you want to retouch. So I'm going to go through, do that. It's not going to be perfect, but okay, let me still have a little bit of stuff here. I'm going to set up a new point right there on the actual fabric, or on the jacket or whatever, I don't know, whatever. And then I'm going to just clone it there. And for this, I'm just going to use the spot healing. Just a tiny little piece there. And there. It's not absolutely perfect, but I'm at, 100% scale on a tiny little monitor. If you're just posting this to social media or having it on a small print or anything like that, you'll be fine. The only time where you'd really want to like have the retouching and stuff be just about perfect is if like you're posting it on a billboard or whatever. But if you're watching this video, you're probably not going to be doing that for at least a while if you ever do. It's not a big deal. So now once you've got all the basic retouching like that done, next you'll want to add another layer, paste the retouch layer on top of that. And now we're going to be doing a skin softening round. You want to hit filter, blur, gauge and blur, play around with this, figure out, I'm going to have mine at like 6.2, that'll probably work for me. Figure out how soft you want the skin to be. And you can always change it a little bit with opacity to make it a little bit less noticeable. And then obviously this is going to put gauge and blur in the whole thing, but if you just want on the skin, what you'll do is you'll hold down Alt, and while you're holding down Alt, you select the mask button right there. Then you'll hit the B tool for brush, and you'll just go around brushing it onto your skin, or on the skin of the person in the photo. And as you can see, it just adds a little bit of smoothing. It's not perfect, but I'd say it works alright. Any of these little lines or his glasses, eyes, any of that, don't smooth out any of that. It's the same thing that you do if you use the adjustment brush for changing the color of the skin a little bit. Just do the same thing where you don't really brush on any of these little indents in the face or the nostrils, the glasses, the whatever, lips, any of that. Don't add smoothing to any of that unless you really want to as a creative decision. Speed this up quick while I add some smoothing. So we pretty much have the skin all softened up a little bit. It's not perfect, but it's good enough for what we're doing. If it's a little bit too much, which I think it might be just a touch too much for this photo, you can play around with the opacity. What you can do now is you can hit Control, Shift, Alt, and add another new layer. Paste the layer below on, and then also hit Control or Command Shift U, which will desaturate it. Then go up to Other, High Pass, adjust your radius to how much you think. You can play around with it, try it a few times, and you'll figure it out. I've got mine set to where I think it should be. And then you'll change your blending mode to overlay. It just adds a tiny little bit of like sharpness and stuff in the highlights and the light parts of the image. And obviously, again, you can change the opacity to be however much you want for it. And then I'm going to add another new layer. There's one more step which you should probably do when you're still working in Camera Raw, but I forgot to. So I'm just going to go back into Camera Raw. There's this little like portrait editing tip that I believe I learned from Lizzie Pierce. Basically what I'm going to do is make the eyes just pop a little bit. You're going to want to add a new radial filter. That's pretty small, but just kind of shows the iris and a little bit more of the eye. Right around there. If you edit these in Lightroom at all, there's a drop down for the radial filters, and I'll have a bunch of different radial filter presets. One of them is iris enhanced, which basically is what we're doing right now. Kind of like the edits and stuff that we're doing is they're pretty straightforward. So after you learn how to do it with the iris enhanced, you can basically take that knowledge and just use a regular radial filter. That's what I do normally. Make sure you go into effect and select the inside, so it only affects the inside of that radial filter, not the opposite. You'll want to bring the exposure up just a tiny bit. You want to bring your whites up a tiny bit. You'll want to bring the texture up a little bit, and then bring the clarity up quite a bit. Add in a little bit of saturation. Once you have result you like for the most part that you think is decent, duplicate on the radial filter and drag the duplicate radial filter over to the other iris, and there. Makes your eyes pop just a tiny bit more. Yeah, that's the result. I'm going to pop up the before and after right now. Okay, so that's it. Thank you guys for watching this tutorial. Look forward to potentially some more in the near future. I will see you guys later. Peace.